was a really important moment for the rise of authoritarianism, in that you had the executive branch trying to criminalize the behavior of members of the legislative branch, which is the branch that represents the people.
The Chris Wray era was totally political. It was political warfare. And one of the things I'm interested in finding out was just how broad was Operation Arctic Frost. You know, we're starting to uncover some things there. There may be some evidence out there that this extended all the way into Congress, that there was investigation and political weaponization against members of Congress that may even have ties with the Select Committee on January 6th. And so we're looking in that direction because I think there may be something to this idea that Arctic Frost spanned much further than just within the executive branch and with Donald Trump. And so this was a complete weaponization on political bias. If you can't defeat someone at the polls, if you can't defeat a Republican at the poll, then you totally destroy that individual. This is exactly what it was happening in Arctic Frost. This is what's happening with weaponization. And I guarantee you, and I can even show you evidence, that this happened within the Select Committee on January 6th. Just talk to Stefan Passantino. They went to destroy this attorney who was just doing his job, but they didn't like the way he was doing it because he was trying to get to the truth. He was telling his client to tell the truth, and they literally went after him to destroy his entire life.
Cassidy Hutchinson, Stefan Passantino relationship, which I think puts Stefan in hot water with the bar. He's already been put on leave of absence by one of his law firms, potential criminal issue.
That was a huge deal. And of course, the grand jury saw through that. And I believe they didn't get a single vote in trying to indict those people.
We have power as jurors. We have seen that these indictments they are trying to get, they are failing, right? Our people understand the assignment.
The Department of Justice is set up to say that the U.S. government stands for the Constitution, and it stands for the rule of law in which everybody is treated equally before the law. And what you're seeing, I think, in this moment is a redefinition of the United States government based on the Great Replacement theory that people like Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon have championed. So the idea that the United States and what they would call Western countries, primarily places like France, have a white culture that is under siege by people of color.
Far-left politician and member of the Podemos party, Irene Montero, shockingly told an event on the 31st of January 2026 in Zaragoza that she is in favor of the replacement theory.
Quiero pedirles a las personas migrantes y racializadas que por favor no nos dejen solas con tanto facha. Y claro que sí queremos que voten. Claro que sí, hemos conseguido papeles, regularización ya, y ahora vamos a por la nacionalidad o a cambiar la ley para que puedan votar, por supuesto. Ojalá, teoría del reemplazo, ojalá podamos barrer de fachas y de racistas este país con gente migrante, con gente trabajadora. Claro que yo quiero que haya reemplazo de fachas, reemplazo de racistas, reemplazo de vividores, y que lo podamos hacer con la gente trabajadora de este país. Tenga el color de la piel que tenga, sea china, negra, marrona, con todas compañeras, las gentes trabajadoras de este país.
What they're trying to do is say that only white people, basically, as I'm saying this, basically what they're saying is the Confederacy won. We want to have a government that defends the ideology of the Confederate States of America. So anybody who is challenging that, including those people who are using the Constitution of the United States, are the people that should be prosecuted by the government itself and by the Department of Justice. It is entirely a flipped script, but actually, until I was sort of outlining this and seeing it in my head, it is as if the Confederates took over the United States of America and created their own Department of Justice in 1870 rather than the one we actually got.
Yeah, and we're seeing, you talk about the basis for all of this. The creation of the Department of Justice was to protect the Black people, Black Americans, and And, that all came out from, we can start, I remember Jelani Cobb, and I talk about this all the time, going back to the Fugitive Slave Act, leading up to people who weren't even abolitionists getting really angry at the government coming in and taking their neighbors away, which is, we're seeing echoes of that now. But what this, going like the opposite of what it was created for, to protect white people at the Civil Rights Division, or when we see, for example, the Department of Justice charging Don Lemon under the Ku Klux Klan Act and 241, and how Harmeet Dillon, who's in charge of the Civil Rights Division right now at the Department of Justice, wants to flip the script on that. Anna Bauer writes for Lawfare, while unconventional, the use of Section 241 in the Don Lemon case may reflect both prosecutorial strategy, but also Harmeet Dillon's personal interest in this law. Even before the indictment was filed, Dillon publicly highlighted Section 241's potential as a sentencing enhancement in the city's church case, observing that the Biden Justice Department had used 241 alongside the FACE Act to secure longer sentences in abortion-related cases. So the FACE Act, the other statute that's charged here in the city's church, is originally to keep people from obstructing me from going into an abortion clinic.
Right.
But then there's also a religious facilities, places of worship tag on there. So she wants to take something from the Ku Klux Klan Act, created to protect Black people and protect their rights, because 241 is conspiracy against rights. And it was to protect Black people from having their rights trampled upon after, Reconstruction amendments, I believe. But then she wants to take 241 and add it to the FACE Act and say, okay, you're not, where Biden would use this to prevent people from blocking people from going into abortion clinics, I'm going to use it to say that Don Lemon somehow impeded people from worshiping in a church. And that just blows my mind how many, things used to protect Black people are now used to go after Black people. We saw this with the George Floyd protests. I remember when we wanted to get the Trump investigation underway for the insurrection.
Will not be a peaceful change of power.
A number of incidents turned violent. Protesters hurled trash cans, flash bombs, and objects at police.
Several officers injured.
Protesters threw rocks and smashed windows, leading to more confrontations, injuries, and arrests.
The chaotic scene just blocks outside the secure area of the inauguration.
The insurrectionist Republicans in the Senate blocked the appointment of U.S. attorneys to the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, saying, we're not going to approve your D.C. U.S. attorneys or U.S. attorney until you start treating George Floyd protesters the way you're treating January 6th protesters.
Another concern that has been raised both in this litigation and then more broadly is the concern that somehow 14.3 accountability will be weaponized to unfairly target the participation of officials in legitimate First Amendment protected political expression. And conservatives have on more than one occasion and in incredibly ugly ways attempted to draw a false equivalency between individuals and officials who participated in the January 6th insurrection and officials who participated in the Black Lives Matter protests across our nation. And Professor Gibson Rankin, the brief that you filed in the New Mexico case, again, addresses this head on. And so if you could tell folks a little bit about that brief, that would be super helpful.
Yes, thank you. No, and this work was created in large part with a brief drafted by Bert Rublin of Speyer in Philadelphia, and because of the really forward movement of the NAACP New Mexico and the NAACP Otero branch chapter, I think there's just something very powerful about what they were addressing. And you're right, they did also talk about some of the First Amendment concerns that were raised in the other briefs. But what really was so powerful about the NAACP's brief that was captured by Judge Matthews and his opinion is noting that it was a false equivalency. It was absolutely a false equivalency that had been established through a number of courts that had already been addressing this point. There is a distinction between elected officials who are engaged in ensuring that there are constitutional rights being followed as it related to Black Lives Matter. Just so everyone is aware, Black Lives Matter was addressing at that time, in summer of 2020, the murder of George Floyd.
George Floyd, he had serious heart disease. He wasn't an old man, but he had serious heart disease, untreated. He had serious atherosclerosis, untreated. He was very high on both fentanyl and meth, which is a lethal combination. Very high on them, probably taking more while he was in the car to hide it from the cops. He opens his mouth in the footage and you see he's got something on his tongue. It's not a chiclet. He's really, really high. He had COVID. He tested positively for COVID then. He had COVID. He smoked. He's a very sick man. And then all of this happens. He's frankly out of his mind because of all of this. He couldn't help it, but he was. And, he was upset. He was agitated. And that, his heartbeat probably, pumping harder. Now I'm going into a medical expertise I don't have, but he was very agitated at being detained by the cops. And remember, they had a reason for detaining him. He was trying to pass counterfeit money. They were detaining him. And it got worse and worse. He couldn't understand that he needed to just calm down, despite being told to by his friends. Just, stop resisting, Floyd, one of his friends said. And so it got the best of him and his heart stopped. But it wasn't because he was asphyxiated. And the other thing is, there was no evidence in the autopsy report, which has not been shared with us until now, not the autopsy report that was suggested by George Floyd's relatives, but the first one. There was no evidence of asphyxiation of any kind, not physical, not subtler things that most of us don't understand. No evidence. Now, Glenn, I don't know. I've looked this up and I can't find it. Is there a such thing as somebody being asphyxiated, but there is no evidence? You can't tell. Maybe that's true, but none was found. So Derek Chauvin didn't cut off his oxygen.
And it was directly dealing with police brutality against an unarmed Black man. And the understanding that his constitutional rights had been violated, his right to be in the public square had been violated, is very, very different than individuals who are engaged in attempts to overthrow the government and to ensure that the constitutional process did not proceed forward. So that's something that really stood out to Judge Matthews, and that was something that was in the brief.
So again, flipping that script and saying it's the people who were at the Capitol on January 6th that are the good guys, and the people who peacefully protested George Floyd are the agitators. It's that whole propaganda switch.
They started lighting dumpster fires on the street in 31st in Minneapolis. And I have pictures of the bank that burned, right? I have pictures of the bank that burned at the end of 31st. But they were lighting dumpster fires right next to apartment buildings where kids were living. I know because I lived on that street for 6 years. And those flames were going higher and higher, and they were throwing more and more accelerant on those dumpsters. And that was the footage that an anchor person or a stringer from CNN said on the screen, mostly peaceful protests.
Maria, there's a great clip of me that is going around far right-wing circles. It was I think the Friday night after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, and I'm there, and I've been on TV for hours and hours, and there's a building burning behind me. The police station is burning. It's been taken over by protesters, and after a few hours of covering this and saying that the police can't get in, that there's a fire engine I can see 2 blocks away, but they can't come any closer, and there's no way they should because they'd be endangered. I wanted to make the point that you made and your colleagues have made is that, and I said it this way, I said, I should be clear, this has been a mostly peaceful protest. Some buildings have been set on fire, but in fact, that's not the whole picture. And of course, that clip was taken out of context and spread around social media that I said it was mostly peaceful while there are buildings burning. And President Trump used it in every one of his final rallies, talking about me by name. But in fact, my point was, most people who came out to protest, even in Minneapolis, even at that intersection where the police station was, were peaceful protesters. If one person sets a building on fire and 10 people loot the liquor store there, it's going to be more newsworthy than the 5,000 who were out there peacefully protesting that they do not want police brutality. And yet the impression is that people burned down Minneapolis because of their protest.
Yes, the riots over the summer were awful. There is a difference, though. You can have the entire city of Minneapolis burned down and not threaten democracy.
You're seeing the attempt to use laws that were designed to protect everybody's equal rights, the right to be treated equally before the law, which is important. Whether, this is, why we protect the right of the KKK to speak, for example, in Illinois. The idea that we have rights that apply to everybody, the idea of using those as weapons to put into place a certain kind of ideology. And it's an ideology that excludes the vast majority of Americans from participation in the body politic. It works to get rid of democracy and replace it with authoritarianism, with this very small group of people, often not just white nationalists, but Christian nationalists, being able to impose their will on the rest of us.
The white Christian majority that dominated this country for 2 centuries, losing not only its majority but its dominant status, is a big freaking deal. Right? We're talking about people who believe that the country that they grew up in is being taken away from them. The very idea of a white Christian America is being obliterated. That's a radicalizing thing. So MAGA forces are not going away. They're not going away. And so they have to be defeated politically. And so if we want to hurry up that process, there's nothing we can do to snap our fingers and fix this conflict tomorrow. But we can defeat them politically. And that's going to take the construction of a broad coalition. It's going to take a coalition that includes elements of the small d democratic forces on the right, business, religious leaders, Republicans, a coalition that expands beyond blue states to win. And the sooner that we win politically, that we defeat them politically, not the Democratic Party, small d democratic forces, defeat the MAGA forces, the sooner we do that, the sooner we'll be able to begin to talk about rebuilding our democracy.